They said she was too poor to have a choice. They said love doesn't feed a hungry stomach. But when Adi's father forced her to marry a struggling farmer nobody in the village respected, she never imagined the man she despised most would be the one heaven had secretly blessed. What started as a marriage of shame was about to become the story that shook the entire village of Umuoma. Welcome, dear viewers, to another powerful African folktale that will shock you, inspire you, and make you believe again in destiny. If you love stories that touch the heart and open your eyes, make sure you like this video, subscribe, and stay with us till the end, because what happens in this story will leave you speechless. Now, let's begin. The morning sun burned through the misty hills of Umuoma village, and the sound of cart crows echoed between the mud houses. Adi sat on a broken wooden stool outside her father's hut, her hands trembling as she stared at the letter her father had written, an agreement for her marriage. Her father, Mr. Namdi, was a proud man who had fallen into poverty after losing his farmland to debt. Since then, anger and frustration had become his companions, and Adi's, his only daughter, had become the punching bag for his disappointments. Inside the hut, his harsh voice tore through the silence. Adi's, do you think beauty feeds a man? Do you think suitors will wait forever? You're 22, no job, no husband, no dowry. At least this one is a farmer. He can feed you. Papa, please. Adi's voice cracked as tears welled in her eyes. I don't love him. I can't marry Chaik. The whole village calls him the poorest man in Umuoma. People say he can't even buy slippers for himself. Mr. Namdi slammed his palm on the table. Then marry your mirror if you don't like him. You're not better than your mother was, a dreamer with nothing to show for it. Her stepmother, Ngozi, who had been eavesdropping by the doorway, hissed and folded her arms. Namdi, let the girl go. You and I both know no rich man will marry the daughter of a beggar. She should be grateful anyone wants her at all. Adiz swallowed hard and stared at the ground. Her heart pounded like a drum. She had always dreamed of becoming a teacher, of leaving the village, of wearing neat dresses instead of torn wrappers. But dreams meant nothing in Umuoma when poverty ruled. That afternoon, she saw Chaik for the first time in months. He came walking down the dusty road, a small hoe slung across his shoulder, sweat glistening on his dark skin. His clothes were faded, and his slippers were stitched with wire. Yet, there was something about his eyes, calm, humble, and strangely deep. He stopped a few feet away from her father's hut and greeted softly. Good afternoon, sir. Mr. Namdi grinned widely. Ow, my son, you came. The gods are smiling today. Sit, sit. Chaik nodded, sitting on a wooden bench. Adiz stayed behind the doorway, watching, anger boiling inside her. Mr. Namdi cleared his throat. I have spoken to my daughter. The date is set for next week. You will bring palm wine and your kinsman. Let the union be done quickly. Chaik looked uneasy. Sir, I don't want to force her. I know she doesn't like me. She'll learn to like you, Mr. Namdi said sharply. Love grows after the bride price is paid. Adiz burst out from behind the curtain. Papa, I won't do it. You can't sell me to a poor farmer. Chaik stood up instantly, eyes wide. Adiz, please, don't be angry. I didn't mean to. I said I won't. Adiz shouted, tears streaming down her cheeks. You can't decide my life. But her father slapped her so hard the sound echoed across the compound. She staggered back, clutching her face as her stepmother smiled coldly. Next week, Mr. Namdi said, breathing heavily, you will be Chaik's wife, whether you like it or not. That night, Adiz packed her small bag and tried to sneak out of the hut. The moonlight bathed the red soil as she tiptoed through the back path, but before she reached the gate, a shadow blocked her way. It was Chaik. He looked at her quietly, his voice soft. Where are you going? Away from all of this, she whispered, trembling. I don't want this life. I don't want to marry you. He sighed deeply. I understand, but running away will only make things worse. The world outside this village isn't kind to girls alone. Adiz glared at him. You don't understand what it feels like to be trapped. Chaik's eyes darkened, but he smiled faintly. Maybe not. But I promise you one thing. If this marriage happens, I will never hurt you. I'll protect you even if you hate me. Adiz turned away, confused by his calmness. He wasn't what she expected. No pride, no anger, just quiet strength. For a second, she almost asked him who he really was, but the thought vanished as quickly as it came. The wedding day arrived faster than she could blink. It was simple and small. No music, no dancing, just whispers and pitying looks from the villagers. As the local pastor blessed their union under a mango tree, Adiz's heart was heavy. Chaik held her hand gently, his palm warm but trembling. When it was over, she didn't smile. She didn't cry. She simply walked beside him in silence toward his small mud house at the edge of the village. That night, as the rain began to fall, Chaik handed her a dry wrapper and a cup of warm pap. You must be tired, he said quietly. Rest. Tomorrow, we'll go to the farm together. Adiz didn't reply. She sat by the small window, watching lightning flash across the sky. Everything in her felt numb, until she noticed something strange. On the small wooden table near Chaik's bed sat a black box made of expensive-looking leather. It was clean, shiny, and completely out of place in such a poor man's room. She looked at it again. There were faint gold initials engraved on its top, CN. Her curiosity burned, but before she could ask, Chaik turned from where he was washing his hands outside. You should sleep, Adiz, he said softly. Tomorrow will be a long day. She nodded slowly and lay down, her mind racing. Who was this man really? Why did he look so calm? As if he wasn't bothered by the gossip or the shame. And why did he own something that looked far too expensive for a farmer? As the thunder rolled in the distance, Adiz closed her eyes, unaware that the man sleeping quietly beside her was living a lie so big that when it finally came out, the whole of Umuoma, and even her own heart, would never be the same again. The morning after the wedding was silent. No drums, no laughter, no congratulations. Just the sound of distant roosters and the rustling of dry leaves. Adiz woke up before dawn, her eyes swollen from tears she didn't even remember crying. She sat by the window, staring at the mist-covered fields, wondering how her life had changed overnight. From a girl with dreams to a wife she never wanted to be. Chaik was already outside, bare-chested, fetching water from the nearby well. The first thing Adiz noticed was the way he moved, not like a weak man beaten by poverty, but like someone used to discipline, balance, and control. Every motion was deliberate, steady. He wasn't the lazy villager she had imagined. When he walked back into the hut, he smiled faintly. Good morning, Adiz. She looked away. Morning. I made some yam porridge, he said, setting a steaming clay pot on the table. Eat before it gets cold. We'll go to the farm soon. She stared at the food but didn't touch it. Why do you keep pretending like everything is fine? She asked bitterly. Do you think a bowl of yam will make me happy? Chaik sighed softly. No, but hunger won't make sadness easier either. She blinked, caught off guard by the calmness in his tone. He didn't argue, didn't raise his voice. He simply sat down and began to eat quietly. Somehow, that silence stung more than anger. A few hours later, they headed to the farm. The morning sun shimmered over the red earth as they walked through the narrow path lined with tall cassava and maize plants. Birds chirped in the distance, and the wind carried the scent of wet soil. Adiz followed behind, dragging her feet and avoiding eye contact. When they reached the farm, Chaik handed her a small hoe. You can rest if you want, he said. You're not used to this kind of work. I'm not weak, she snapped. I can work. He smiled faintly. I never said you were. For a long while, they worked in silence. Then Adiz noticed something strange again. The way Chaik handled his tools wasn't like a typical farmer. He was methodical, strategic, and his farm was cleaner than any she'd ever seen. Rows perfectly measured, the crops healthy and green. He kept a small black notebook tucked in his pocket, where he scribbled notes after every few minutes. Finally, curiosity got the better of her. What are you always writing? Chaik looked up, a shadow of amusement in his eyes. Just records. Records of what? Progress, he replied simply, then bent down to continue working. Adiz frowned. His words sounded too polished for a man the villagers mocked as poor. She looked at him closely and noticed something else. The way he spoke, the little hints of city accent, and the faint scent of expensive cologne on his skin. Who exactly was this man? Later that evening, when they returned home, Chaik sat by the small fire outside their hut, writing again in that mysterious notebook. Adiz sat nearby, pretending to pick stones from rice but secretly watching him. The flickering flames lit up his face, calm, thoughtful, confident. For the first time, she noticed he was actually handsome, not in the boastful way of rich men she used to admire, but in a quiet, genuine way. Finally, she asked, "Why did you choose to marry me, Chaik? You could have married anyone. There are many girls in the village who like you." He paused, then closed the notebook gently. "Because I saw something in you," he said. "Even when you were angry at life, I saw kindness in your eyes." Adiz looked away. "You're lying." "I don't lie," he said simply. "I just don't show everything I know." Those words lingered in her mind all night. "I just don't show everything I know." The next morning, while Chaik was away tending to a far corner of the farm, Adiz decided to clean the house. As she swept under the bed, she accidentally knocked over the black box she had seen on the first night. It slid open slightly. Inside, wrapped neatly in a fine piece of cloth, was a golden wristwatch. She gasped. It wasn't just gold-colored. It was real gold, heavy and shining. Beside it was a sleek card holder embossed with the logo of a high-end Lagos bank. She froze. What was a poor farmer doing with such things? Before she could think, she heard footsteps outside. Panicking, she shoved the box back under the bed and picked up the broom. Chaik entered, his forehead glistening with sweat. "You cleaned the house," he said, smiling. "Thank you." She nodded quickly, avoiding his eyes. It was dirty. He took a step closer. "Adiz, is something wrong?" "No," she lied, her heart pounding. He looked at her for a moment, as if he could see through her thoughts, then nodded slowly and said, "All right. Rest a bit. I'll go fetch some palm fruit." When he left, she sat down, breathing hard. There was no doubt anymore. Chaik was hiding something big. The gold watch, the bank card, the notebook, the calmness, the education. It all made sense now. But what was he doing in this village? Why pretend to be poor? Why marry her of all people? That night, she couldn't sleep. Every creak, every rustle made her anxious. Around midnight, she heard movement. The faint sound of the black box being opened. She peered through the darkness and saw Chaik kneeling beside it, whispering softly to himself. "One more year," he murmured. "Then I'll tell her everything." Her eyes widened. "Tell me what?" she thought, barely breathing. He closed the box and sat still for a long time, staring into the shadows, before lying back down beside her. She turned away quickly, pretending to sleep. But her mind was burning with questions. What was he hiding for a year? What truth could possibly be so big that he had to pretend to be a poor man? The next morning, things seemed normal. Chaik acted like nothing had happened. He made breakfast, cracked small jokes, and even helped her fetch water from the stream. But Adiz's heart was racing with curiosity and confusion. She wanted to ask him the truth, but something told her to wait, to watch. 2 days later, while fetching firewood in the nearby bush, she overheard 2 women gossiping. They were from the next village. My sister, have you heard of that man? Chaik, one said. They say he's not ordinary." "How?" the other asked. "They say he once worked for a big company in Lagos before he disappeared. Some say he owns lands even the chiefs don't know about." Adiz froze, the bundle of sticks slipping from her hands. She didn't wait to hear more. She ran all the way home, her heart thudding in her chest. When she got there, Chaik was sitting outside, humming softly, fixing a broken chair. She stood in front of him, breathing hard. "Who are you, Chaik?" she demanded. "Tell me the truth." He looked up slowly, his expression unreadable. What truth? You're not poor. You're not just a farmer. I found your gold watch. I saw your bank card. And I heard what people said about you. Who are you really? For a moment, the silence between them was heavy. Then Chaik stood up, wiped his hands, and looked straight into her eyes. I'm exactly who you married, he said quietly. A man trying to build something from the ground. Stop lying to me, she shouted, tears filling her eyes. Why are you pretending to be poor? Why did you choose me if you could have had any rich woman in Lagos? Chaik's jaw tightened. Because the rich ones never looked past my money, he said softly. And because sometimes, Adiz, the only way to find true love is to hide the truth. Her breath caught. What truth? He turned away. You'll know when the time is right. Adiz stood there, trembling. He walked past her quietly, leaving her with 1,000 questions echoing in her mind. As the evening breeze swept through the village, Adiz looked at the man she once hated and realized something terrifying. She was beginning to care about him. But she also knew deep down that whatever secret he carried, it was bigger than love. And when it came out, it might destroy everything. The days rolled into weeks, but Adiz could no longer see Chaik with the same eyes. Every smile from him looked like a secret. Every quiet moment between them felt like a puzzle she was too afraid to solve. He still woke up before dawn, still tilled the soil with his bare hands, still came home with dusty feet. But deep inside, she knew this man was playing a game no one else understood. One late afternoon, after a long day at the farm, they were returning home when the sky began to darken. The wind picked up dust and leaves as thunder rumbled in the distance. Adiz quickened her pace, balancing a basket of cassava on her head. But before she could reach the hut, Chaik stopped suddenly. Wait, he said, staring at something down the path. A sleek black car was parked quietly under a palm tree, an unfamiliar sight in their humble village. Adiz froze. Nobody in Umuoma could afford such a car. As they approached, the driver's door opened, and a man in a suit stepped out, tall and clean-shaven, holding a black envelope. Good evening, sir, the man said respectfully, bowing slightly. It's been a while. Adiz turned to Chaik, confused. Sir? She whispered. He called you, sir. Chaik's expression hardened. You shouldn't have come here, he said in a low voice. The man nodded. I apologize, sir, but the board is waiting. The project deadline is near. You can't hide forever. Adiz's mouth fell open. Board? What board? The man looked at her briefly, then back at Chaik. Is this the woman? Chaik's tone sharpened. That's enough. Tunde, leave. Tunde hesitated. But sir. I said leave. Without another word, the man got back into the car, started the engine, and drove off, leaving behind a cloud of red dust and a very shaken Adiz. She turned to Chaik slowly. What was that? Who are you? He didn't answer immediately. He just stared at the fading car, his jaw tight. Forget what you saw, he said quietly. Please. I can't forget, she cried. That man called you, sir. He said something about a board and a project. What kind of farmer has a board of directors? Chaik's eyes softened, almost pleading. Adiz, not everything you see is meant to be understood right away. Please trust me. Trust? She repeated bitterly. How can I trust someone who lives two lives? He sighed deeply and walked ahead without another word. Adiz followed slowly, anger and confusion twisting inside her. The silence between them that night was thick enough to cut with a knife. Later, after he had fallen asleep, Adiz lay awake staring at the ceiling, listening to the distant croak of frogs and the whistle of night wind. She couldn't stop thinking about that man's words. You can't hide forever. What was Chaik hiding from? Who was he really? The next morning, she decided she would find out, even if it meant breaking his trust. When Chaik left for the farm, Adiz waited a few minutes, then went straight for the black box again. Her hands trembled as she opened it fully this time. Inside, beneath the gold watch and the bank card, was a folded stack of documents. She opened the first one and gasped. It was a certificate of incorporation, CN Holdings Limited, signed under the name Mr. Chaik N. Okafor as the managing director. There were also land ownership papers and a photograph of Chaik wearing a sharp suit, shaking hands with powerful men in what looked like a company office. She covered her mouth in shock. He wasn't just rich. He was powerful. But then her eyes fell on another paper, a letter. It was torn at the edge, and the ink had slightly faded. It read, "To my son, Chaik, you have inherited everything I built, but I pray you never lose your soul chasing what destroyed mine. Remember, true wealth is not in money but in the heart. Learn to find love that sees you, not your gold. Until then, your riches will remain your curse." Adi's eyes widened. "His curse," she whispered. Just then, she heard footsteps outside. Panicking, she stuffed the papers back into the box and closed it tightly, pretending to sweep the floor. Chaik entered the hut, breathing hard, as though he had walked fast. "Did anyone come here?" he asked, scanning the room. "No," she replied quickly, forcing a calm voice. He looked around again, then at her. "Adiz," he said softly, "if one day you find something you don't understand about me, promise me you won't judge." Her heart skipped. "Why are you saying that?" "Because truth doesn't always come the way we expect," he murmured. That night, Adiz couldn't eat. She watched him from across the small table. The man she thought was a poor farmer, who might actually own half of what the village didn't even know existed. And yet, he lived here among red dust, carrying hoes, sleeping on a bamboo mat. What was he trying to prove? A week later, strange rumors began to spread through the village. Some said they saw a convoy of cars parked secretly by the old mango tree at night. Others claimed strange men in suits had been visiting the village chief, asking questions about Chaik. The whispers grew louder each day. One evening, as Chaik and Adiz returned from the farm, two policemen appeared at their doorstep. One of them, a round man with a thick mustache, asked in a firm voice, "Are you Mr. Chaik Okafor?" Chaik's face went pale. "Yes," he said quietly. "What's the problem?" "We were sent by order of the state. You're wanted in Lagos for questioning regarding your company's disappearance from the records. There are missing funds, millions." Adiz's heart stopped. "Missing? What?" The officer handed Chaik a paper. "You're to report to the police headquarters tomorrow morning." The villagers gathered quickly, whispering among themselves. So our farmer is a fraud. Ah, God, he deceived all of us. Poor Adiz, married a criminal." Adiz stood frozen as Chaik lowered his head. But then he did something no one expected. He smiled. "I'll go," he said calmly. "But remember, not every story told in the dark is true." That night, Adiz sat on the bed, her body shaking. "Chaik, tell me this is not true. Please." He looked at her, his eyes tired but gentle. "I didn't steal anything, Adiz. But someone wanted me destroyed. I left the city to find peace, not to hide." "Then why didn't you tell me?" "Because I needed to be sure," he said softly, "that someone could love me for me, even without the name, without the money." She bit her lip, tears filling her eyes. "Do you think I can love you now that I know all this?" He smiled sadly. "That's what I'm afraid of." The next morning, he packed a small bag. Before leaving, he held her hands tightly. "If I don't come back," he said, "don't believe what they say. Wait for the truth." And then he walked away down the dusty road, leaving Adiz standing in front of their hut as the sun rose behind him, his shadow long and uncertain. Days passed, then weeks. No word, no message, only silence. Until one evening, a car pulled up at her doorstep again. It wasn't the police this time. It was Tunde, the same man in the suit. He stepped out, eyes red as though he hadn't slept. "Madam Adiz," he said softly, "I came to tell you something." Her heart pounded. "Where is Chaik? Is he in jail?" Tunde hesitated, then whispered, "No, madam. He's gone. The car he was in, it crashed on the highway last night." Adiz froze, her breath catching. No, no, that can't be true. Tunde bowed his head. I'm sorry. He died instantly. Her knees gave way, and she fell to the ground, sobbing uncontrollably. The villagers gathered again, whispering, some in pity, others in gossip. But what none of them knew was that in the black box under the bed, one final letter lay hidden, addressed to her, sealed with Chaik's name. And that letter would soon change everything they thought they knew about the poor farmer of Umuoma. The morning after Chaik's death, the air in Umuoma felt heavier than usual. Even the birds seemed quieter, as if the wind itself mourned the man everyone had once mocked. The news spread like wildfire. Some villagers whispered that he had died a fugitive. Others said the gods punished him for hiding his wealth. But Adiz didn't care what they said. She sat motionless on the bamboo mat, her face pale and her eyes empty, clutching the edge of her wrapper as if it could hold her broken world together. Ngozi, her stepmother, arrived before noon, pretending to cry. Oh, my daughter, she said, placing her hands on her chest dramatically. What a wicked world. Who would have thought a young widow would sit so soon? Adiz didn't even lift her head. Please go, Mama Ngozi, she said weakly. I'm not in the mood. Ngozi clicked her tongue. Ah, Adiz, I'm your mother now, don't chase me. They say your husband was rich. Where are his things? Did he leave anything behind? You know, before his people come and scatter everything. Leave. Adiz snapped suddenly, her voice trembling. Please, just go. The older woman stepped back, hissing softly. Ungrateful girl. I'm only trying to help you. But she left, muttering curses under her breath. When Adiz was alone again, she finally allowed herself to weep. The man she had once hated, then learned to respect, was gone, just when she was beginning to understand him. She thought about his last words, if I don't come back, don't believe what they say. Wait for the truth. The truth. What truth? She sat up suddenly, her heart racing. The black box. She pulled it out from under the bed and placed it on her lap. Her hands trembled as she opened it again. The gold watch still gleamed faintly in the morning light, and beside it, the sealed letter waited, her name written neatly in his handwriting, to my wife, Adiz. Tears blurred her vision as she opened it carefully. The letter was short, but each word cut deep. My dearest Adiz, if you're reading this, it means I didn't make it back. I want you to know that you changed my life in ways you will never understand. I came to Umuoma not to hide, but to heal. I had everything, money, cars, power, but I lost my peace. Greed, betrayal, and lies from those I trusted forced me to disappear. I built a company with my late father's inheritance, but when I refused to do business the corrupt way, they framed me. I lost everything overnight, but the one thing I still had was faith. And when I met you, I saw honesty again. The truth is, I never wanted you to marry me by force. I wanted to reject your father's offer, but something in me said I was meant to meet you. Maybe it was God's plan to show me love that had no price tag. If I don't return, go to Lagos and find my lawyer, Barrister Raymond. He will explain the rest. He has something that belongs to you. Always remember this, Adiz, real wealth is not in gold or land, but in the heart that refuses to sell its dignity. Yours forever, Chaik N. Okafor. By the time she finished reading, her hands were shaking uncontrollably. She pressed the letter to her chest and sobbed. The villagers had called her foolish for marrying him, but now she realized he was the only man who had ever seen her worth. That night, Adiz made up her mind. She would go to Lagos. The next morning, she packed her small bag, wrapped the letter carefully inside her clothes, and began her journey. The road was long and rough, but her determination carried her through. When she reached the city, the noise, the tall buildings, and the endless movement of people overwhelmed her, but she kept going. She found Barrister Raymond's office on a quiet street in Ikeja. The old man looked up from his desk when she entered. His glasses slid down slightly as he studied her face. You must be Mrs. Okafor, he said softly. She nodded nervously. Yes, sir. He told me to find you if anything happened to him. The lawyer sighed deeply, leaning back in his chair. I wish we were meeting under better circumstances. Chaik was not just my client. He was like a son to me. Adi's voice broke. He said you have something that belongs to me. He opened a drawer and brought out a brown envelope sealed with wax. Before he left for the village, he updated his will. He didn't want anyone to know until he was sure of your heart. Inside this envelope is the ownership deed to his estate in Lekki and the remaining shares of CN Holdings. Adiz froze. Estate? Shares? Yes, Raymond said gently. You are his legal heir. Everything he owned now belongs to you. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. The poor farmer everyone laughed at had left her an empire. But, she whispered, he said he lost everything. The lawyer smiled faintly. He did lose a lot, but he rebuilt in silence. He started new businesses under other names. He wanted to see if he could live a simple life and still find joy. That's the kind of man he was. Tears streamed down Adi's face. Why didn't he tell me? Because he wanted to be loved for who he was, not what he had, Raymond said. And I think you passed that test, my dear. He handed her the keys and documents. He also left you something else, a message recorded before he went back to Umuoma. Would you like to see it? Adiz nodded, wiping her eyes. The lawyer turned a small laptop toward her and played a video. The screen flickered, and then Chaik's familiar face appeared. He was sitting at his desk, wearing a white shirt, looking calm but emotional. Adiz, he said, smiling gently, if you're watching this, it means I didn't make it back. Don't cry too long for me, please. You gave me more peace in 1 month than I found in all my years of wealth. I wish I could have told you everything sooner, but some truths are only safe in the hands of time. I love you, Adiz. And if there's life after this one, I'll find you again. The video ended, and for a long time, Adiz sat in silence. She had no words, just a storm of emotions. When she finally stood to leave, the lawyer stopped her. One more thing, he said. Before he died, Chaik was working on a foundation for widows and poor women. He named it Ada's Hope. He said you inspired it. Adiz pressed her palm against her chest, tears falling again. He named it after me. Yes, and now, it's yours to run. She left the office that evening with the envelope clutched tightly in her hand, walking through the city lights with her head high. The girl the village once mocked as a poor man's wife was now one of the richest women in the state. But it didn't feel like victory. It felt like a test she hadn't asked for. When she returned to Umuoma a week later, the villagers stared in disbelief. She came back in a black jeep with tinted windows, dressed simply but gracefully. The same people who had mocked her now bowed their heads and greeted her with respect. But Adiz didn't care about pride or revenge. She only wanted peace. She walked straight to her father's compound. Mr. Namdi rushed out, trembling. My daughter, he said, his voice shaking. I heard you have become rich. My child, forgive me. I didn't know what I was doing. Adiz looked at him calmly. You sold my heart for a bag of rice, Papa. But I forgive you, because if you hadn't forced me, I might never have met the only man who truly loved me. He fell to his knees, weeping, but she simply turned and walked away. That night, she sat outside her new home, the same hut, repaired and painted. The stars glittered above, and the cool wind brushed her face. She smiled faintly, remembering his voice. Real wealth is not in gold, but in the heart. She whispered into the wind, You were right, Chaik. You were right. But just as she closed her eyes, she heard a knock on the door. She frowned. It was nearly midnight. Who could it be? She opened the door slowly and froze. Standing there in the moonlight was a man, covered in dust, thin, weak, but unmistakably alive. Chaik. Her lips parted in disbelief. Chaik? He smiled faintly, his voice hoarse. Did you really think death could keep me from you? And then he collapsed into her arms. Adiz's scream pierced through the quiet night. Chaik! Chaik! Wake up! She shook him desperately, her hands trembling as his limp body slid against her arms. His skin was cold, his lips pale. For a moment, she thought she was dreaming, that grief had finally driven her mad. But when she felt his shallow breath brush against her neck, she realized it was real. He was alive. Barely, but alive. She dragged him inside, laid him on the bed, and lit the kerosene lamp. His clothes were torn, his body covered in bruises. Dried blood clung to his forehead. Panic rose in her chest as she ran to fetch water, washing his face gently, whispering, "Please, Chaik, don't die on me again. Not now. Not like this." His eyelids fluttered. "Adiz," he whispered weakly, his voice a mere breath. "I told you, the truth always finds its way home." Her tears spilled freely. "You're alive. I thought you were gone forever. They told me you died in a car crash." He gave a faint smile. "They wanted you to think that. But God wasn't done with me yet." Adiz froze. "Who did this to you?" Chaik winced as he tried to sit up. "It was never an accident," he said, coughing. "The people who framed me, they found out I was coming back to clear my name. They tried to silence me for good." She gasped. "You mean they tried to kill you?" He nodded slowly. "The car was tampered with. I barely escaped. Someone passing by pulled me from the wreck before it exploded. I've been hiding for weeks, healing, watching, waiting for the right time." Adiz pressed her hand to her chest, overwhelmed. "Chaik, my love, you've suffered too much. You should have told me." He reached for her hand, his grip weak but steady. "I couldn't. The less you knew, the safer you were." She shook her head, tears falling. "You think I care about safety when you're out there fighting alone? I would have stood with you." He looked at her with soft eyes. "And that's why I married you. Because even when you were angry, I saw the lioness hiding inside you." For a long moment, silence filled the room. Only the crackle of the small lamp broke the stillness. Then Adiz leaned forward, resting her forehead against his. "You're home now, and I swear, no one will ever hurt you again." The next morning, the sun rose gently over Umuoma village. The news spread fast. Chaik is alive. The villagers rushed to the compound in disbelief. Some shouted in joy, others in fear. "It's a miracle," one woman cried. "The gods have brought him back from the land of the dead." But Adiz kept the doors locked. She didn't want anyone seeing him yet, not until he recovered. She knew danger still lingered somewhere beyond the hills. 3 days later, Chaik could finally walk again, though he moved slowly, leaning on a stick. Adiz nursed him with herbal soup, cleaned his wounds, and listened as he finally told her everything. "Years ago," he began, his eyes distant, "my father built a company called CN Holdings. We traded palm oil, cocoa, and agricultural goods across West Africa. When he died, he left me everything. But I was young, naive. I trusted the wrong people. My partners embezzled money and forged my signature. When I refused to play along, they accused me of fraud. I was arrested, humiliated, and betrayed." Adiz's fists clenched. "Wicked people. They ruined your name. I fled Lagos after the court released me on bail. I needed to disappear until I could prove my innocence. I went from town to town, pretending to be poor, learning how ordinary people lived. That's how I ended up here. And my father," Adiz said bitterly, "sold me to you like a debt." Chaik smiled faintly. "Yes, but maybe that's how destiny works. It hides blessings inside pain." She looked at him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "You said someone saved you from the crash. Do you know who?" Chaik's gaze hardened. "Yes, it was Tunde." Adiz frowned. "Your driver?" He shook his head. "Not just my driver. My cousin, and one of the few people I can still trust. But I fear he's in danger too. They'll come for him next." As if on cue, a knock thundered on the door. Adiz's heart jumped. "Who's that?" she whispered. Chaik gestured for her to stay quiet. He reached under the bed and pulled out a small wooden box she hadn't seen before. Inside was a folded pistol, old but functional. "Chaik," she gasped. "You kept a gun." He didn't look at her. "It's for protection." The knocking came again, louder this time. "Open up," a voice barked. "Police." Adiz froze. "Police? What do they want?" Chaik's face went pale. "They found me." He moved to the window, peeking through the crack. 3 uniformed men stood outside, armed. Behind them was another car, a black SUV with tinted glass. He could tell it wasn't just police. Someone else was pulling the strings. "Stay inside," he whispered. "No matter what happens." "No," she cried, clutching his arm. "You can't go out there." But he gently pulled her hand away. "Trust me." He stepped outside slowly, his stick tapping against the ground. The officers aimed their guns immediately. "Hands up. You're under arrest." "For what?" Chaik asked calmly. "For fraud, attempted bribery, and impersonation," the lead officer barked. Adiz rushed to the doorway. "That's a lie. He's innocent. He's been here all this time." But the officer ignored her. "Take him." As they moved closer, the SUV door opened, and out stepped a man Adiz had never seen before. He wore a grey suit, dark glasses, and a gold wristwatch that gleamed in the sunlight. He clapped slowly as he approached. Well, the man said with a smirk. "The ghost finally rises. Welcome back, cousin." Chaik's eyes narrowed. "Kenneth." Adiz turned sharply. "Cousin? You mean his family?" Kenneth smiled coldly. "Oh, I'm more than family. I'm the man who now owns everything you left behind." Chaik's jaw tightened. "You stole it, Kenneth. You forged the documents. You set me up." Kenneth shrugged. "Business is war, cousin. You should have known that. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'll be taking what's left of your little secret life." He looked past Chaik, his eyes landing on Adiz. "And you must be the village wife. Not bad. You've upgraded." Chaik's fist clenched. "Don't you dare talk to her." Kenneth smirked. "Still protective, I see. How sweet." Without warning, Chaik lunged forward and punched him squarely in the jaw. Kenneth staggered back as the officers raised their guns. "Shoot him," he shouted. "Stop." Adiz screamed, running in front of Chaik. "If you shoot him, you'll have to kill me too." The officers hesitated. Kenneth wiped blood from his mouth and glared. "Fine. Arrest them both." As they were dragged toward the car, Chaik whispered to her, "Don't be afraid. The truth always wins." They were shoved into the back seat, handcuffed together. The SUV drove off, raising a trail of red dust as the villagers watched in horror. Hours later, as the car sped down the lonely highway toward Lagos, Adiz looked at him through tears. "Chaik, what are we going to do?" He turned his head, eyes calm despite the danger. "We'll fight back. But not with guns, with proof." "How?" she asked desperately. He smiled faintly. "Because Kenneth forgot one thing. The real evidence isn't in Lagos. It's right here, in Umuoma." She stared at him, confused. "What do you mean?" He looked out the window, his voice low and firm. "Before I left the city, I buried something in this village. Something that can destroy every lie they built against me." Adiz's heartbeat quickened. "What did you bury, Chaik?" He turned to her slowly, his expression unreadable. "The truth." The car roared on through the dusty road as thunderclouds gathered in the distance, foreshadowing the storm that was about to break, not just in the sky, but in their lives. The rain poured mercilessly over the highway as the black SUV raced toward Lagos, its tires slicing through puddles of muddy water. Inside, Adiz and Chaik sat handcuffed together, their clothes soaked, their hearts heavy. The 2 officers in front spoke in hushed tones, while Kenneth sat smugly beside the driver, occasionally glancing back at them with a satisfied grin. "You see, cousin," Kenneth said loudly over the hum of the engine, "you should have stayed dead." Life was already giving you a second chance, but you had to ruin it. Chaik looked up, his eyes calm but burning with quiet fire. You know what I've learned, Kenneth? Death doesn't scare me anymore. But men who build their success on lies never sleep peacefully. Kenneth laughed coldly. Peace is for the poor. Power is for those who take it. Adiz clenched her fists. You're a monster. You destroyed your own blood. Kenneth smirked at her reflection in the glass. Oh, my dear, don't flatter me. I didn't destroy him. I just outsmarted him. Before Chaik could respond, lightning cracked across the sky, followed by a deafening thunderclap. The rain intensified, blinding the driver. Suddenly, the car jerked violently. One of the tires burst with a loud bang. The vehicle swerved, spinning wildly before crashing into a tree. Screams filled the air. The windshield shattered, the sound ringing through the storm. When the chaos settled, Kenneth groaned from the front seat, blood trickling down his forehead. The driver was unconscious. The officers stumbled out, dazed and coughing. Adiz blinked through the rain. Her wrists hurt, but the handcuffs had snapped loose in the impact. Chaik lay beside her, bruised but alive. Chaik, she gasped, shaking him. Wake up. He groaned, sitting up slowly. Are you hurt? No, but we have to go, now. They crawled out of the wreckage, slipping in the mud. Kenneth's voice followed behind them, weak but furious. Don't let them escape. But it was too late. The storm hid them as they ran into the forest, guided only by flashes of lightning. They didn't stop until they reached a narrow clearing, panting, drenched, trembling. Adiz turned to him. Where are we going? Chaik wiped rain from his face. Back to Umuoma, to dig up what I buried. The journey back took 2 long days on foot, with help from strangers who recognized Chaik's face from old newspapers but chose to stay silent out of pity. By the time they reached the outskirts of Umuoma, the sun was rising, its orange glow cutting through the mist. Adiz's body ached, her feet blistered, but she pressed on. You said the proof is buried here, she said. Where exactly? Chaik led her to a small piece of land behind an abandoned palm oil press, a forgotten patch of earth near the stream. This was my first farm, he said quietly. When I came here pretending to be a poor man, I hid everything I needed right under everyone's nose. He knelt down and began digging with his bare hands. The soil was soft from the rain, and within minutes, he struck something hard, a metal box. He pulled it out, mud dripping from its edges. Adiz's eyes widened as he pried it open. Inside were stacks of documents sealed in waterproof wrapping, a flash drive, and several photographs, images of bank transfers, forged signatures, and a company audit report clearly showing Kenneth's involvement in embezzlement and fraud. This, Chaik said, holding up the papers, is what they tried to bury with me. Adiz's hands flew to her mouth. You kept all this hidden. I had to, he said. If Kenneth or the board found it, they would destroy the evidence. I needed to wait for the right moment to return. She looked at him in awe. And now, he said, standing up, we end this. But before they could move, a shadow emerged from behind a tree. Kenneth. He was limping, soaked, and furious, his gun aimed straight at Chaik. Touch those papers, he hissed, and I'll end both of you right here. Adiz froze. Kenneth, please, don't do this. He's your brother. Kenneth's voice cracked with rage. Brother? He took everything. Father's company, father's love, everything was always about Chaik. Do you know what it feels like to be second best all your life? Chaik took a cautious step forward. You did this to yourself, Kenneth. All father ever wanted was for us to work together. You let greed blind you. Stop talking. Kenneth shouted, waving the gun. You think you're better than me? You think you can crawl out of the grave and take everything back? I'll make sure you die for real this time. Adiz stepped between them, tears in her eyes. If you shoot him, you'll have to kill me too. Kenneth hesitated. The gun trembled in his hand. The rain had started again. Soft, relentless. His breathing grew uneven. "Move aside, Adiz. You don't understand." "I understand enough," she said firmly. "You've already killed his peace. Don't kill what's left of your own soul." Chike's voice was low but steady. "Kenneth, you still have a choice. Surrender, and I'll make sure you get a fair trial. Don't let hate finish what greed started." For a moment, Kenneth's expression flickered. Guilt, fear, anger all tangled together. Then, his hand shook violently. The gun went off. The sound echoed through the forest. Adiz screamed. Chike stumbled backward, clutching his shoulder. Blood spread across his shirt. "Chike!" she cried, catching him as he fell to his knees. Kenneth froze, his face pale. "No, I didn't mean to." Before he could finish, a second gunshot rang out, from behind. Kenneth collapsed instantly. Two police officers emerged from the trees, guns drawn. One of them was Tunde, his clothes muddy, his face grim. "We've been tracking him since Lagos," he said, rushing forward. "I told you I'd find you, sir." Adiz sobbed as she held Chike, blood staining her hands. "He's hurt. Please help him." Tunde tore a strip of cloth from his sleeve and pressed it to the wound. "He'll live. The bullet just grazed him." Relief washed over Adiz as Chike's hand gripped hers weakly. "You see," he whispered, smiling faintly through pain, "the truth always wins." By evening, Kenneth's body was taken away, and the officers secured the evidence box. The sun set behind the hills, painting the sky in orange and purple. Chike sat outside the hut, his shoulder bandaged, Adiz beside him. "You could have died again," she said softly. He chuckled weakly. "Maybe I was meant to, but your love kept pulling me back." She smiled faintly. "You're not allowed to die again. Do you hear me?" He looked at her, eyes filled with warmth. "I hear you, my queen." For the first time in months, peace settled over Umuoma. But deep inside, Adiz knew this wasn't the end. Kenneth's allies in Lagos still controlled part of the company, and they wouldn't stop until they destroyed everything Chike stood for. That night, as Chike drifted into sleep, Adiz sat by the window, looking at the stars. Her reflection shimmered faintly in the glass. Stronger, wiser, no longer the frightened village girl she once was. She whispered, "If they come again, I'll be ready." Because this time, she wasn't just a poor man's wife. She was the woman behind a resurrected empire. But in the shadows beyond the forest, unseen eyes watched their hut. And a quiet voice whispered into a phone, "He's still alive. Phase 2 begins tomorrow." The morning sun broke gently through the thick palm trees, bathing Umuoma in soft gold. Birds chirped in the distance, but the village still carried whispers of what had happened. People now looked at Adiz and Chike with awe, not pity. They had survived betrayal, deceit, and even death itself. But what no one knew was that another storm was quietly gathering beyond the horizon. For the next few weeks, Chike slowly recovered. His wound healed, but the pain in his soul remained. Each day, Adiz helped him walk outside to the same spot near the stream where they once farmed together. Now, instead of a hoe, he carried a notebook and pen, planning how to rebuild his company and reclaim his father's legacy. One morning, as they sat under the mango tree, Adiz broke the silence. "What happens now, Chike?" she asked softly. He smiled faintly. "We start again. Not as the poor farmer or the forgotten billionaire, but as people who finally understand what matters." He glanced at her. "But I won't lie to you, Adiz. Kenneth's death doesn't mean the battle is over. His partners still control part of my empire. They'll try to fight back." She reached for his hand. "Then we'll fight together. I'm not afraid anymore." Her words warmed him more than the sun. 2 days later, they returned to Lagos with Tunde and the evidence box. The police investigation was reopened, and one by one, the truth unfolded. The forged signatures, the embezzlement trail, and the conspiracy Kenneth had built all pointed to the remaining board members of CN Holdings. The case became the talk of the city. When the court finally ruled, the verdict was clear. Chaik's name was cleared of all charges. The company he built was restored to him, and the men who betrayed him were sentenced to long years in prison. The day he walked out of the courthouse, journalists surrounded them. Cameras flashed, microphones shoved in their faces. "Sir, how does it feel to regain your wealth?" one reporter asked. Chaik smiled gently and turned to Adiz. "I didn't regain my wealth," he said. "I just remembered where my true riches have always been." That night, back in Lagos, Adiz stood on the balcony of their new home. A mansion far grander than any she had imagined. But it wasn't the gold or glass that made her heart swell. It was peace. It was knowing that the man beside her was alive, whole, and hers. Chaik came up behind her, wrapping his arms gently around her waist. "Do you remember the first night we met?" he asked with a grin. "You told your father you'd never marry me." Adiz laughed, shaking her head. "And you told me you were just a simple farmer." He chuckled. "Maybe we were both lying that day. Or maybe," she whispered, turning to face him, "we were both telling the truth, just not the full one." They stood there quietly, the night breeze brushing their faces. For the first time in a long time, there was no fear, no secret, no pretending. A week later, Chaik and Adiz returned to Umuoma. Together, they opened Ada's Hope Foundation, just as Chaik had planned before his death. The foundation provided free education, food, and farming tools to poor widows and orphans. Villagers from all around came to see the once poor couple now blessing others. At the opening ceremony, Adiz addressed the crowd. Her voice was calm but powerful. "When I was younger, I thought marrying a rich man was the only way to escape suffering," she said. "But I learned that true wealth is not in money. It's in kindness, patience, and love that refuses to give up, even when the world laughs at you." The crowd erupted in applause. Tears filled many eyes. Even her father, Mr. Namdi, stood among them, weeping silently, clutching his chest as regret washed over him. Adiz saw him and smiled faintly. Forgiveness had already taken root in her heart. As the sun set over the crowd, Chaik stepped forward, holding her hand. "This foundation isn't just for the poor," he said. "It's for anyone who ever thought life was over, to remind them that sometimes, what looks like an ending is just the beginning." That night, the celebration went long into the dark. Drums echoed, laughter filled the air, and for once, Umuoma was alive with joy. Later, when everyone had gone, Adiz and Chaik sat alone under the stars. Fireflies danced in the fields, and the sound of distant singing drifted through the night. "You know," she said quietly, "I used to think my story ended the day Papa forced me to marry you." He smiled, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Maybe that's when it truly began." They both laughed softly. The night breeze carried the smell of wet soil, the same earth that once held their secrets, now holding their peace. But just as they stood to go inside, Tunde walked toward them from the darkness. His face was serious. "Sir," he said, "I just received a call. Something strange has happened in Lagos." Chaik frowned. "What is it?" Tunde hesitated. "One of Kenneth's old business partners escaped custody last night. The man who financed everything. The one Kenneth called the ghost. He's disappeared." Adiz's smile slowly faded. She turned to Chaik. His eyes had darkened again, the peace they had just found trembling in the air. "So it's not over," she whispered. Chaik exhaled slowly, his jaw tightening. "No," he said. "It's just beginning." The wind picked up, swaying the lantern beside them. The flame flickered, bright, uncertain, before settling again, as if even it was bracing for what was to come. Adiz looked up at him, her voice steady. "Whatever comes next, we'll face it together." He nodded. Together, always. And as the night deepened, the two figures stood side by side beneath the vast African sky, their shadows stretching long and strong against the earth that had once buried their pain, now holding the promise of a new battle, a new dawn, and perhaps a part 2 of their story still waiting to be told. Dear viewers, what would you have done if you were in Adiz's place? Could you love a man everyone called poor? not knowing he was a secret billionaire? Tell us your thoughts in the comments below, and if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share so more people can be inspired by stories of faith, love, and destiny. A storm may be over, but another one might just be coming. Stay tuned.